Okay, we're live now.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Senate Government Operations Committee. It is Friday, February 24th, 2024. Wow, numbers 24. And we're going to start with H516. It's the 23rd. Darn. I number thing.
You have one more day.
Okay.
Well, now it's 124.
223.
Before that.
All right, so Tanya and I are all messed up with our numbers, but we're gonna start with H516, an act related to the amendments of the charter of the city of Essex Junction. And I think I would entertain a motion on this one.
I would move that we pass out favorably, H516, an act relating to the approval of amendments to the charter of the city of Essex Junction.
Excellent. So motion, or is there any discussion? Okay, the clerk can call the rolls.
Senator Bohosky,
Yes.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Norris, yes. Senator Washington,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson,
Indeed, yes.
Chair Hardy.
Yes. Okay, and Senator Bukowski will be the reporter for this one. And
Got it.
if you want to take,
Should I take it up now?
if you want to run it up now so that,
Those are a color advantage.
yeah.
I could tell. Well, you got in, look at this skirt, we got a whole sort of like sunsetty thing going on.
Okay. Well, I'm really excited because now that we've taken care of our business on the bill, today is Art Day in the Senate Government Operations Committee, and the committee members and Olivia can tell you that I talk about this all the time. I'm like, Art Day, can't wait for Art Day. And we're here to celebrate art in public places in Vermont, and also especially to celebrate the new artwork in our committee room. And it's very exciting. We have art from Franklin County, from Windsor County, from Washington County, and from, are you also Washington County? Lamoille County. So we're just celebrating 4 parts of the state and the artwork from all over. And Senator Bukowski is going to slip out quickly, but we're going to start with Susan McClure, who is the executive director of the Vermont Arts Council, to sort of kick us off with thinking about art in public places. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you.
And I think we're gonna actually introduce ourselves. I should have done this before Senator Bukowski, for everybody in the room and for people who might be joining us remotely. But I'm Senator Ruth Hardy. I represent the Addison district. This is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Olivia Parker, I'm the committee assistant.
She's the one that organized everything for us. So thank you, Olivia. This is Senator Tanya Bukowski, who represents Chittenden Central District.
Nice. I'm Rebecca White, and I represent the Windsor County District.
Senator Bob Norris, Franklin County, to include the town of Alberg and Grandal County.
Senator Ann Watson from the Washington District.
That's our Peter.
No.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District.
Excellent. So if you want to just introduce yourself for the record and get us started.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, hi everyone. I'm Susan McClure. I'm the executive director of the Vermont Arts Council. Thank you very much for having me today and for organizing this great day and a great way to end a long, short week. But most importantly, thank you all for your support of the arts and culture in Vermont, and for your deep understanding that not only do the arts connect us to our shared humanity and help us understand the world, but the arts are also a driving force of Vermont's economic growth and community development. So we do a lot in our world, and thank you for supporting it. So I'll just talk briefly about the Arts Council and then a little bit about public art, and then I'm so excited to hear from the fellow people presenting today. So the Vermont Arts Council has been the state's primary provider of arts funding, advocacy, and information since 1965. And our work is really based on the understanding that the arts transform individual lives, that they connect people more deeply to each other, and that they energize the economy and really sustain the vibrant cultural landscape of Vermont. We're also the state affiliate for the National Endowment for the Arts, And while we were created in state statute, we are the only state arts agency in the country that operates as an independent nonprofit.
Yeah, you can raise money.
Yeah. So our work happens really in three main areas. The first is direct grants that invest in artists, arts organizations, arts educators, and municipalities. The second area is around training and capacity building for artists, organizations, and educators to really help them do their best work. And our third focuses on building and sustaining the creative economy of the state through the Vermont Creative Network. And in FY23, the council distributed just over $8 million in funding across the entire state. That funding does include the Creative Futures Pandemic Relief Program. So I will say $8 million is not exactly a typical amount for us. We're usually closer to 1 to 2. But last year we awarded 343 grants to 85 individuals in 201 organizations in every county and 100 towns across the state. These grants went to support capacity building, public art, which we'll talk a little bit about today, accessibility, in and out of school arts education, and lots more.
Nice.
And
More chairs, yay.
you're fine.
Might be
Put
one.
one over here.
Maybe we can.
That's a lot.
Sorry.
No,
This
worries.
is just so
Yeah,
popular.
it's popular.
This usually happens when I
Oh,
take them.
yeah.
The
Right.
crowd grows.
They heard.
That's what art does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tanya, I was appreciate.
I know.
All right. Okay, chaos. Are there seats for everybody who wants to sit now?
Okay,
You
yeah.
are here, we appreciate it.
There are 2 chairs. Sit down.
There's a chair over here.
Sit all day.
Yeah.
There's another chair there.
Okay. Are we good? All right, carry on.
Thank you. And importantly, we always apply an equity lens to ensure that we're delivering our funds equitably across the state to people who are most in need or people who are typically underserved by state resources. That's a really important value to the Art Council. What we're really working to do is create the conditions so that Vermont artists and arts organizations can do their best work and grow our economy and meet the needs of our communities during this really complicated time. And actually, in recent years, a big focus of our work has been on emergency response and recovery for the creative sector. First, with pandemic relief funding, the council has distributed over $14 million in COVID aid since 2020, which far eclipses what we usually do or are able to do.
We could get used to it.
You could, we would love to. And that actually included the $9 million of ARPA funds in the Vermont Creative Futures grant. Thank you to the legislature for making that happen. You know, those COVID reliefs really saved organizations and businesses. And this is a great example of state and federal funding to the arts working. The creative sector is recovering. Of course, there's bumps in the road, but that funding was absolutely vital to support our institutions and creative companies that are the backbone of our creative state. Then this summer, as you heard about a few weeks back from Amy Cunningham, the Arts Council stepped forward to provide support and relief for flood-impacted artists and organizations. So now moving into FY25, the council will really be focused on building resilience and preparedness for the arts and culture sector. And the role of the arts and culture in community healing and recovery will be a significant priority for our work as Vermont works to both recover and prepare for what looks like a pretty uncertain future on some days. So I'll just explain a little about how our funding works. We're a quasi-state agency, so about 85% of our funding comes directly from the National Endowment for the Arts and the state of Vermont each year. And our NEA grant that we get every year requires a 1-to-1 match from state dollars. And our general fund allocation allows us to secure federal funds that are then distributed all over the state. And that this year, we are anticipating that that's going to look like around $970,000 from the NEA that we will need to be matched in our general fund request. So thank you all for your support of that too. But today, I get to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is public art. And not just any public art, but specifically public art that's funded by public dollars. So public art is really any art that is in public space. It could be sculpture, murals, paintings on the walls in public buildings, the building itself, even live performance in public spaces that are temporary or ephemeral. And why do we even do this? Like, why do we want to have public art? Well, public art has documented positive economic benefits. It enhances social cohesion, cultural understanding, public health, and belonging. And beyond that, what it really does is build our communities. And Karen Nevin, who's the executive director of Revitalizing Waterbury, says that public art makes a space a place. And I did send a link out to a
great.
Isn't that a good line? Yeah, she's amazing too. But I sent a link out to a video that we created, which actually features your own now Senator Watson, talking about the power of public art. So I hope, and sharing examples from around the state. So I hope you'll get to take a look at that and really see the visuals of what we're talking about. You know, it's from the Torchlight Parade in Waterbury, the silos in Cambridge, the art in the windows in Montpelier after the floods, the whale's tails, both sets of them, and so much more. Really, public art makes our state the special place that it is. And the Arts Council supports public art through a few specific programs, both the Art in State Buildings program and our arts projects and animating infrastructure grant programs. So animating infrastructure grants, I think, are really interesting because they support community projects that integrate art into infrastructure improvements. And the idea being that as Vermont is continuing to improve our infrastructure, we also want it to be integrated into the fabric of our communities, which we can do through the arts. A few recent projects have been, just some examples were a mural at Johnson Elementary School created by Juniper Creative Arts and designed by students. And through that process, students engaged in conversations about belonging, representation, and community. And they really express that through co-created public art that they will see, their community will see, their families will see. It's really powerful. We also funded a project at the Howard Center with the Howard Center Arts Collective. Those are all artists who've experienced mental health or substance use challenges. And they created an installation outside the Howard Center's main space of mailboxes and mosaic art, inviting visitors to reflect on whether mailboxes have become relics of the past, which everyone in Montpelier has strong feelings about right now. And then the Art in State Buildings program is, our state public art program. It's a really unique and important program to support and promote the work of Vermont artists and improve the quality and character of state buildings. So the council administers the program, which is funded through the Capital Bill in partnership with BPF. And since 1988, the program has commissioned artwork from over 60 artists in 35 state-owned buildings and public spaces around the state. The most recently completed project was an installation of photos by Carol Langstaff and a mural by Catherine Weigers at the newly built Vermont Department of Mental Health River Valley Therapeutic Residence in Essex. And every year we have a group that of BGF and other state folks who come together to really identify where the project should happen and what new construction. Those projects have to be linked to new construction of some sort of a state building. And we're really excited about our plans for the future to do that. And I think David is going to be sharing about the State House Interpretive Plan, but we do have plans in the works to commission a work through the Arts in State Buildings program that's linked to the new interpretive plan for the State House when that is ready to go. And in the coming weeks, we'll be sharing a new map on our website of all of the public art across the state that's been funded by the Arts Council, which is a more complicated project than it sounds, which is why it's taking a little longer. But that's going to be a great resource to be able to go there and look at all of the public art experience that's been funded through public dollars across the state.
And then are open to the public?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And I'll just wrap up by saying that, public art in public buildings, like the art you see here on the walls of the State House and even the State House itself, really goes beyond placemaking, and it helps us understand our own place in the history and future of our state. And, on signing the legislation that created the NEA in 1965, then President Lyndon Johnson said, "Art is the nation's most precious heritage, for it is in our works of art that we reveal ourselves and to others the inner vision which guides us as a nation. And when there is no vision, the people perish." Ooh. So before coming to the Arts Council, my background was really all about how people learn America's history through the arts. And what I have seen over several years of working in publicly funded institutions, including 7.5 years at the Smithsonian, is that people really need to see themselves in history to understand that they too are history makers. So when people connect to the fact that people in history were just individuals who made choices, and they made choices that impacted history, people today can understand that they too are making choices and that their choices will have an impact on the future as well. So it may seem like just a painting or a sculpture, but it's actually a tremendous responsibility and a tremendous opportunity for us to empower Vermonters to really build a stronger society and future for all of us. So not only does our economy and our communities and our spirits need this public art, I really think that our democracy needs public art too. So with that, I'll say thank you for having me. Take any questions, and I'm really excited to hear from my fellow presenters today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That was
Yeah, that was great. I think we're gonna hold questions unless there's some burning question, because I wanna make sure everybody feels like they get their time without feeling rushed. So
Let's move over.
thank you for being here.
Oh, happy to be here.
It's really great to have you. And David and Jack, I think we're gonna talk about the interpretive plan for the State House. And I'm gonna set the stage a little bit, because this is
Yeah.
very near and dear to my heart and to Senator Clarkson's heart, and I'm sure everybody's, but this is something that Senator Clarkson and I have really worked to put in motion for a number of years. It was, I think, one of the very first conversations I had after I was elected to the Senate was with David about how can we diversify the art on the house, on the walls of the State House. The first time I came to the State House was with my 4th grade daughter, and I looked around and I saw a lot of artwork that looked the same to me. And my young daughter, then, 10-year-old daughter was like, wow, all the kids were like, where am I in this State House? They didn't see anybody their age. They didn't see people that looked like them. The girls didn't see women. The students of color didn't see people of color. And it just felt a little overwhelming. And then when I started to serve here as a senator, it still felt that way to me. So I talked to David, how can we change this? And Senator Clarkson and I worked on 2 pieces of legislation, and one led to this interpretive plan that we're going to hear about now to really try to diversify the art on the wall so that what we're seeing in here could be more seen across the entire State House, featuring diverse artists, featuring diverse types of art, and featuring diverse subjects. David, thank you for being here and giving us a sneak peek at the almost completed interpretive
Correct.
plan. It's been a little while, so.
It's been a little longer.
It has been a little while. We've had a pandemic in here and the flood now, possibly other catastrophes coming. But we're gonna get this out before that happens.
Okay.
And within the next couple weeks, in other words, in terms of a public feedback period. So that's what I'd like to talk with you about, in fact, is how we roll out this interpretive plan the way you want us to. And then what do we do with it? Because I think those are huge questions. As you know, plans come and go. They can often end up on a shelf and never revisited.
Sure.
So I think our goal is definitely to make this one a guiding plan for me and my successors for the next 5 to 10 years. So with that in mind, the principle at the heart of this interpretive plan is an easy one, I think, for everyone around the table and around the room to buy into. And that is that this is not a museum alone. It is the state capitol. It is at the heart of Vermont democracy. And with Vermont democracy very much as the guiding, overarching theme of this building, we took Vermont town halls to heart as well, because not only does every state in the nation have a state capitol, I think we can all agree that Vermont is not like every other state. And consequently, its state house should not be like every other state's. In fact, the first thing we did was search for an interpretive plan at a state capital in America and found none. None. So we're forging new territory here, which I know excites all senators, knowing that they have brought this about.
Hey,
And
this is where the history books are gonna, the first interpretive plan of a state house, Vermont.
what better year than 2024
Yeah.
to possibly roll out an interpretive plan that might be employed throughout the nation? dare I say?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing about Vermont democracy. It is about our communities. And we know that we are lucky to live in a state where the scale of the place is such that we can actually enjoy community in a very different way than other parts of the country that are much more challenged about how they keep cohesive community at their heart. Here, it's relatively easy. And yet, the challenges all throughout our country that we are faced with when we talk about democracy, when we talk about the institutions of governance and self-governance at the heart of that, are so fragile, we think. And yet, I'm guessing that if you start with a state like Vermont that has a scale that allows us to appreciate community in a way that others cannot, we can, in fact, not necessarily influence the rest of the nation. That is not what this document is about. But we can ensure that what is conveyed here strengthens those institutions. And that is really what this is about. And it strengthens it in the exact way that Ruth described, with a fourth grader coming in and understanding possibly a little bit of what's going on in the chaos of this building. Because even though we are small, I think we can all agree that this State House in scale is among the smallest. Square footage wise, we are definitely among the smallest Capitol buildings. And we feel it during a typical legislative session, do we not? The chaos is in part because we're all thrown together in inadequately accommodated committee rooms and trying to get chairs in here. Pages are running around. People like Susan are attempting to orate and then get interrupted right at the critical moment when she was about to say something great. This happens over and over and over again in these rooms. So the other great thing about this is that this is being rolled out, I hope, at the same time that the legislature and the governor decide to do something to the State House physically that will enable us to say this. Here is the big idea at the heart of the plan. Everybody who's a Vermonter has to come here and feel that this State House belongs to them.
Yes.
It's that simple and yet hard. Because as you suggested, Ruth, representation on the walls of the building itself does not reflect everyone in Vermont, as possibly over white as we are. Nevertheless, every Vermonter has to come in here, and there's a critical motion right there, has to come in here. So we've learned during the pandemic that there are different ways of accessing the State House that we never would have dreamed of prior to the pandemic. But there also, up until this year, was scaffolding on the west side of the building to prevent ice and snow shedding off the roof from killing people approaching our only ADA compliant entrance.
Good.
And then once you got in through the rear west door, where's the lobby? Yes, there's signage pointing to the lobby, but we all know how in a chaotic environment, how do people even find their way where they need to go, right? So looking at that situation is part of what this plan does. In other words, we take every audience, we identify all the audiences as any good interpretive plan does. And we take that audience through the building and what do they need to get from and the experience of visiting the State House? And part of that is certainly the art on the walls, but it's also about deepening the experience for them. If it's a school group, we have ways of improving the experience of a typical class that is trying to understand where they fit in the scheme of things. How do you take a fourth grader and make them understand why all of you are here and what that has to do with their lives? So we talk usually, for example, about rules, and we talk about how a rule is not all that far from a law. And what are the things at home that you appreciate about life? And we go from there. And we do it in all of the chambers in the State House. We're hiring a brand new visitor services coordinator for the State House, and she arrives on Monday. Her name is Martina Mikalova, a native originally of the Czech Republic. She has lived for a while in Kansas City, Missouri, with her husband and child. She is on her way now. She is driving their car from Kansas City. She arrives on Monday to begin her duties, to the great relief of Jack, who since Angelica's departure has been coordinating all of the school visits to Montpelier.
Wow.
On behalf of the Vermont Historic History Museum, as well as the Supreme Court, all of those being part of a typical school visit experience of the State House. So Jack is thrilled. We're excited. She is about to get her master's in museum studies from Johns Hopkins.
Oh, cool.
And she will be part of our team. She will look at this right away on Monday for the first time and help us tweak it as it goes through executive branch review. So the only thing left for this document right now is for the governor's office to say, present this now to the committees that want to see it. That would be yours. And that's where I'd like this conversation to go next. Because
Can you give us a preview right now?
Sure.
Because I'd love to hear more about what's in the plan itself.
absolutely.
And also talk about who put together the plan and how
Yes.
that was done.
So
Because I also want to make sure we have time for everybody.
absolutely, we hired
Our website?
We will, once
We've been-
we've gone through
once
that
it's
approval
through
process.
executive
Not-
branch approval,
So we can't see it to tell.
Not
not
yet.
today.
Yeah.
Not
Sorry,
today.
I was hoping we would be able to see it. It's still not, hasn't.
It's all, I mean, we're almost there.
Yeah.
So, it identifies audiences, all of the possible audiences, and it's a complex audience here at the State House because
Yeah.
these are not museum goers
Yeah.
all the time. There are people who are here actively engaged in the legislative process. There are people who are here to be honored in both chambers for some purpose, and then they want to appreciate the State House while they're here. So it's all that and more. We call out themes in the tradition of New England Town Meeting and self-governance. The accessibility of the State House for the audience broadly. So I'm not just talking about physical changes that might take place behind the building. that unite the first floor with a circular floor plan, throwing the doors behind Abraham Lincoln open to potentially an atrium that would be located in the courtyard that is in the middle of all the different parts of the building. That would bring visitors from the west rear entrance and the east. And you would enter the building from the rear, coming straight into the main lobby. And
Yeah.
once you're in the main lobby, depending on the season, rooms 10 and 11, which are currently occupied by House Committee rooms because of the pandemic, might be available again as general use rooms. And our plan is to enliven them with the help of people like Susan, with the help of the Abenaki Artists Association, with the help of a very long list that's in here of potential partner organizations that would extend our reach. We would turn both rooms 10 and 11 into rotating gallery spaces by installing track lighting, removing governors from the walls,
Thank goodness.
Well, some of them are good. Those are counting.
and
Right.
making it possible to have shows of contemporary art. So these would not be, this is not a portrait project as much as it is enliven the State House with all kinds of storytelling. So the depth of this report is about getting a little bit beyond mere representation, although we acknowledge that that has to be addressed. For example, we have Alexandra Twilight now hanging in the main lobby. There is a desire to have a woman of stature hanging directly opposite him.
Ooh, yeah, because
There is a list of possible women who would hang there. And we would set up a process with all kinds of advisors who would help us get to the decision. But I just use that as an example. This is the State House.
Right.
And one of the reasons you only see governors and military figures on the walls is because somebody long before I ever arrived said that the rule is if you're just a legislator or somebody other than a governor, even a lieutenant governor, you had to die in the flood of 1927 in order to be a lieutenant governor worthy of hanging in an oil painting. He's the only lieutenant governor and he perished in Barrie
oh, no.
during the flood of 1927.
And where is this portrait?
It used to hang in David's office, but David didn't want him anymore.
There's some lieutenant governors in the Senate chamber, I believe, also. Yep.
Yes, well,
There are.
yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And those have been there since the
Oh,
chamber.
just a weird rule.
There's just one. There's just
Oh,
one.
that's just fun. Anyway.
And which is balanced by the Secretary of the Senate, the first Secretary of the Senate and the first Lieutenant Governor to preside over the Senate.
Oh.
So that's why they're there, and they've been there
I have not looked.
since the chamber was inaugurated. So, so the question then gets back to the thorniness of who, if you're doing portraits, belongs in the State House and who does not.
Mhm.
And it's the who does not part that is tricky.
But our eyes are open. When we're
but-
trying to be open.
There you go. This document is all about inclusiveness, right? And I think we need to understand that as time goes on, we have a way of looking at things differently than our predecessors, and the people who follow us will do the same. So we don't need to be unduly concerned to paint a portrait of an Alexander Twilight because of his racial identity in the year 2022. Because it speaks volumes of where we are in this time. And there may be a time when they question our decision, but what can we do about that?
Yeah.
We're about our time and what is appropriate for the State House in our time. So that's where I feel Gretchen Soren, who was the consultant that we hired to help us with this document, she helped me get over things like that.
She was our person from the Fenimore Cooper.
From the Cooperstown Graduate Program in Museum Studies.
Right.
And she was a great advisor. Her wisdom is in this document. She opened the door to all kinds of exercises that we can do or not do. But it's basically about every Vermonter claiming ownership of the building, feeling that this is theirs, seeing enough representation of people like them that they feel this is their building. And that will happen, but it is a larger question as well. Using contemporary art in historic environments, which is something, I don't know how many of you have been out to the Kent, which is a state-owned historic site in Calais, but that is a historic complex owned by the Division for Historic Preservation, and it is enlivened with the art of our time in a timeless setting. And I would submit that that kind of powerful juxtaposition is exactly what we would find in galleries right off the main lobby that are otherwise known as rooms 10 and 11.
Yeah.
And so.
That would be.
Okay, so with that, I will say, I think this interpretive plan under the legislation that was passed was supposed to have been completed in April of 2022. And so it's nearly 2 years past when it was supposed to be out. So I'm really hoping that the process from here will be quick and that you can get us that within the next few weeks. The
Oh,
final
it
document,
will,
so that we can.
but I
post it
think
on
the
our
question,
website.
how do you see this playing out in terms of public feedback
Yeah.
or
Well,
and solidifying it?
We could do a
In
public
terms of-
hearing.
Public feedback, I mean, certainly we could do a public hearing if you want, but I think the first would be to have our committee and other relevant committees in the State House review it and
Okay,
have.
which was our plan.
Yeah,
In
I
other
mean,
words,
it's hard for me to figure out how we would do the public until I see what kind of document it is.
Sure,
But I think Susan would probably have some ideas about how to get more public feedback.
sounds
And the Historical Society and
Yep.
the Humanities of Vermont.
so the Legislative Advisory Committee on the State House
Yes,
would be the,
We need to
the
reconstitute.
legislative advice, that it's still constituted, but
It
just having
is.
it
We need
meet.
to
Right.
bring
Yeah.
life into it.
And then having, people around the state be able to give feedback, but I think that Susan kind of,
Yeah.
and those organizations probably have that kind of infrastructure.
Yep.
But I think the first thing is to have it finished so that we can review it.
Oh.
And, that I look forward to that and.
so it has lots of links in it, links to potential partners, links to architectural studies that have been done with Freeman French Freeman.
Yeah,
We tried very hard to make this as expansive as possible in that way, because we see this as a guiding document for years to come.
yeah,
And for people beyond myself, for
Yeah.
example. Right.
Senator White.
Thank you, Madam Chair. it is very clear you have put a lot of work and thought into this, and you've worked with a lot of different organizations to try to get a real kind of parade of opinions.
Sure.
So I wanted to say thank you for doing that,
Sure.
and I really appreciate the sentiments that were shared at the beginning. Because and thank you for coordinating all of these visits without having a partner in crime to help with all that work, because what you're doing is extremely important. When I came to the State House for the first time, it was on a school trip, and I knew who Madeline Cunin was, and I never met her, obviously, as a child, but to see her portrait, it had such an effect on me. So it does, and I feel that
Yeah.
has definite ripple effects in my ability to feel that I could even run for office.
Sure.
So that is also a part of this conversation, and it really does matter. So I want to say thank you. I don't want us to wait we have to wait for the executive branch to review it,
Well,
and then we get to see it. Why don't we get to see it first?
David
Well,
worked
No,
on
no,
that,
they're
and
not
then-
changing anything.
Oh,
Okay.
They're giving me the ability to interact with you on their behalf. Remember, I need to remind you that I am executive.
he worked
Oh,
for the executive branch.
That may
So-
confuse you.
That does.
Yeah.
confuse
Lots
me.
of people in the building
I guess-
don't know that.
Okay.
As I will repeat, the faster the better. It's almost 2 years beyond the
I
deadline,
know.
which is pretty frustrating. So I'm excited to see it and to read it, and thank you for the preview today. And I wanna move on because we have
Sure.
a lot of people, but thank you, David, for
My pleasure.
that and your obvious passion about it. I actually am gonna turn to Carol, because
You-
you are on the Friends of the State House, and would love and I know that you had something prepared that you wanted to, and then we'll hear from all the artists. So do you wanna come up and join us at the table?
You have to sit in the hot seat.
Do you wanna come together?
We have 2 chairs up there.
Carol, join.
Oh, you sure? I mean, we can pull that one right up.
Oh.
She's saying it to
Yes.
In a previous life, I was on the Commission, the Vermont Commission of Native American Affairs. I was chair and she was my vice chair.
Oh, so, okay,
They
so
call
she's
it-
not a part of this. Yeah.
They called us Carol Square, because her name is Carol.
Yeah, that's why I was looking at both,
Yeah.
but I wasn't
It's
sure if
support
you wanted to
system.
come together. But if you wanna introduce yourself, and I know you had prepared something you wanted to say today too for
I
our
did.
day.
I did, yeah. So, excuse me, I'm an old woman, so I'm gonna read from my notes. I can't talk so glibly as David, it's just. Yeah, all right, so I'll introduce myself. I'm a member of the Abenaki Nation of Missisquoi. I served on the Vermont Commission of Native American Affairs for 6 years, 5 of those as chair. I've also served on the Racial Equity Task Force, the Curatorial Task Force, and am now vice chair of the Friends of the State House Board.
And your name, sorry.
Harold McGranahan.
Thanks.
Yes.
I'm
Sorry
for
about
that.
that, Please note I'm here as a member of the public and I'm not representing the board in my remarks, so.
You can represent me any day.
Oh, all right. Thank you. And I'm representing you guys. I agreed to serve on the task force and the Friends Board because I feel that this building has historically ignored those who are not members of the dominant culture. This means bringing in inclusivity where there is little representation of women, BIPOC, and other minimalized communities. I often hear in meetings how wonderful this building is, how it is so historical, and how it is so special to many. But from another perspective, it is also the symbol of the government which displaced and attempted to erase an entire people through legislation. This legislative process took away their rights, their way of life, their language, their own way of governing. The question becomes how to make this place one where someone would consider visiting and to feel welcome. I never came into this building until I was 60 years old. And that was when I was first working on a project to get the Abenaki display recognition items in place. So it really kind of strikes a chord when I hear people saying that we need to get everybody in here, it's everybody's building, because it's never felt that way to me. And coming from the Northeast Kingdom, where I grew up, and all of my family and parents are from that area, nobody ever talked about the State House, nobody cared, because it was too far removed from that. So when I listened to the interpretive plan, which the board has been kind of pushing to hear also, just like you, yeah, a lot, yes. It really becomes the main point of everything, doesn't it? How do we make the building feel welcoming and to make everybody feel a part of it? So that's not in my notes, but I've often felt troubled and frustrated with the insensitivity of what objects are displayed, where they are placed, or how they are chosen. For example, I'm expected to understand that certain things are works of art and therefore inherently acceptable. This is where the implicit bias and microaggressions play an integral part. When one is not aware of such bias and microaggression, unless and until it is brought to light, it will continue. Today, I'm bringing to light the fact that there is a woman for whom several of us on the board have advocated for. This is not the one who has been named in one of your previous meetings. This is someone who spent her entire lifetime serving in countless ways our state and country during the 20th century, not just speaking once in front of the legislature. This woman is Flora Jane Coots. Flora Jane Coots was born September 25th, 1897 in West Charleston, Vermont, the eldest daughter of Flora Mabel Langevin and Robert M. Coots. Her commitment to serving others in so many areas, including in the Vermont State House, is an outstanding example of someone who should be recognized for all she gave to the state of Vermont during her lifetime. What better way than to include her portrait in the State House collection in a prominent place? As the Vermont Legislature resolution describing and honoring Flora after her death concludes, Flora Coots was one of Vermont's most highly esteemed citizens who served the people of her community and the state, as well as people throughout the world, in an exemplary fashion. Here's a brief summary of her life and contributions with links to detailed information listed at the end. So when I send the copies out, all of the links, if you go to them, you can get more detail.
Yeah, it'll be on our website, yeah.
She graduated from Hardwick Academy and received a certificate for Johnson Normal School in 1917. She enrolled at Boston University at 18 and took graduate courses at Cornell and Pratt. She taught school in Vermont, Cleveland, Ohio, and Korea from 1921 to 1925. Her accomplishments include working for the Vermont Extension Service from 1925 to 1936, establishing the first Vermont 4-H club in 1929. She was the first full-time 4-H agent in Orleans County, organizing tree planting to restore deforested places, establishing the Coots Moriarty Camp on Salem Lake, Derby, Vermont. This camp still exists, providing summer camp for youth and educational opportunities to school children, and running her own business from 1936 to 1937. She also served as the first executive secretary of the Orleans County Development Association, as executive secretary of the Vermont Association for the Crippled, on the Northeastern Vermont Development Association, and was intimately involved in the establishment of Jay Peak and Brook Mountain Resort. As the second woman in the Vermont Senate, the first woman to serve for 2 terms. While there, she served as the chair of the Senate Education Committee during her first term and the Senate Public Health Committee during her second. As a representative for Newport in the Vermont House for 6 years. During her tenure, she served on the House Government Operations and Education Committees. Though encouraged by some to representatives to run for Speaker of the House in 1965, she declined. During World War II, she was club director for the American Red Cross and was stationed in India, Burma, and China from 1943 to 1945. During that time, she walked the Burma Road with the refugees, an experience that traumatized her so greatly that she was unable to speak about it in later years. She was a member of the state personnel board and active in a number of local civic groups. She held many offices, including president of the Vermont Business and Professional Women's Club, associate director of the 350th Champlain Valley Festival, vice chair of the Vermont Republican Executive Committee, and delegate to the 1940 Republican Convention in Philadelphia. As I noted in the opening, and it is worth repeating, Laura Coates was one of Vermont's most highly esteemed citizens who served the people of her community and the state, as well as people throughout the world in an exemplary fashion. She deserves the recognition and open acknowledgement of her dedication and service to the state of Vermont.
Carol, thank you so much for that. The first time I met you, we talked about Flora Foods in the curatorial task force, and I have remembered ever since, and would love to see her honored on Falls at the State House. So thank you for bringing her story to us today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And I did want to note that they're in the display, the Women in the State House exhibit, in the lobby, there's a mention of Flora Foods as one of the first women to serve in the assembly and believed to be of Abenaki heritage. This is her niece, Carol.
I didn't see that.
So I asked her to join me today, so that if any of you had any questions regarding her, she'd be able to answer that as well.
She was a senator like all of us too, so that's especially meaningful for this committee.
And a house member.
Yeah.
So she was, for some of us,
Yes.
really bad.
Okay.
Very.
Oh, wait, do we have do you have photos of her?
There is one.
You've
yes.
I
got, you
think we have
have
one.
images of her?
Yeah, she's in the, there is a photograph.
Oh, there is,
Yeah.
okay.
It's in the women's too.
Oh, cool.
We do also have, am I allowed to jump in?
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
we do also have,
Identify, say if you're for the record who you are.
I'm Jack Zylinga, I'm the assistant state curator. A couple weeks ago, maybe longer, when we were working on the exhibit project, I spent some time at the library at the Vermont Historical Society and scanned a number of documents and images related to her. So we do have a file, somewhat robust file of items related to her from VHS as well in our files.
Yeah,
Oh, nice.
yeah, she's on the state archives website as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
the links that I provided in the documentation, there's a description of her in the Vermont, it's called the Lakefront Magazine. There's also photos of her in the.
Is there a book or anything?
No.
Is it like a book? I read a
There
book
are the
about
journal,
her.
my dear, we have some journals of our
Ooh,
actions.
someone needs
She
to
is
make
the-
this, if I was a good historian, I would be working on a book.
So,
That whole family was pretty remarkable.
yeah, that family sounds pretty remarkable. Carol, did she serve first in the Senate and then the House, or the House and then the Senate?
It was the house.
I think so.
Cause
I think it was, yeah, cause
okay, cause I thought when you said she was invited or asked to be Speaker of the House, I thought maybe she still was in the Senate, because isn't it, you could be, you technically
Mhm.
could?
2 different times.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, she was,
Yeah.
the years that.
Okay, you don't have to,
Right.
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I can find the real years for you.
she's in all the journals. I mean,
Yeah.
she's
That's
in
cool.
legislative action.
Oh,
Yeah, she
well,
was
it's just
very,
surprising in the Senate.
Yeah.
very, very busy woman.
She clearly did a lot. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And you did send that to Olivia, correct? Yeah, so it's on our
So you have it
website.
electronically, right?
And anybody can take a look at that.
There's several links at the bottom.
Yes, and this came, the first time I heard of her was that meeting, the first time I met you, when we were brainstorming women who we thought should be on the State House walls, and she rose to the top pretty quickly, because of all that she did and what kind of a groundbreaker she was. Yeah.
And I think she was there during a time where it wasn't safe to self-identify.
Yeah.
Carol and I are both members of the Abenaki Nation in Sisseton. And in order to become a member, one has to have proven genealogy. So Carol's mother and Flora were sisters.
Yep.
The Lingerie name is a well-known name in Sisseton. So, there's been some question as to whether she's Abenaki, but again, I brought with me.
Well, thank you, Carol, very much, and thank you, Carol, for being with us today. All right, we're gonna turn to some of the artists in the room that worked on the artwork in our group. First is August Burns, and August want to come up to the table and talk about her piece, which is a kind of blue, right? Yeah. And it's kind of amazing. We have the artist and the subject there.
Thanks to you. So first I want to thank the committee for doing this, and special thanks to Anne for inviting me, for Washington County artist, to Walden, and also to Senator Hardy for all your efforts to make art more accessible. It's really exciting to have this work here in this room. I'll say a little bit about me. I seem to be an artist now, although it's really not my moniker. When people say, "Oh, you're the artist," I'm like, "Oh yeah, okay." I had a 34-year career in women's health. I worked in 27 countries and worked for the World Health Organization, among other things that I did. But when I was a teenager, I had the privilege of working with an artist for a year who trained me in classical painting. I went on to art school, to university, and got discouraged pretty quickly by abstract expressionism, which just wasn't my thing. I was just, when I was 15 years old, I walked into the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I just was thunderstruck by art and painting, and classical painting particularly. It was magical to me. So I luckily was invited by a close friend to be at a birth of her baby, which went spectacularly well after many, many months of study and a good deal of planning. I then got trained and went on to in a career in midwifery and women's health and international women's health. 20 years ago, as I was driving past the Keller Cupboard Library, I said, I need art in my life again. I hadn't touched a brush in 25 years. I started painting, and lo and behold, much like riding a bicycle, it was all there.
Nice.
And, I was able to just paint. And then, I guess it was about 10 years ago or 9 years ago that I had a show at the Supreme Court, as I decided to leave my job, which I loved, and to devote myself full time. And said, maybe I could be really good at this. And so I started painting full time. I got an art show at the Supreme Court, and then I was invited to be considered for Governor Shumlin's portrait one day, which I appreciated. My initial response was no, thank you. I had spent 34 years in many life and death kinds of situations, and I didn't need the stress going into.
Oh my.
Nor did I want to paint another man in a suit.
We hear ya.
I was counting on Sue to become governor, but that didn't happen. Anyway, I eventually threw my hat in the ring and was chosen, and I absolutely loved painting his suit.
Not him, but the suit.
No, I love painting him. I had an amazing time. I fall in love with everyone I paint. It is an intimate thing to do. It's extraordinary. It's a privilege
Yeah.
to be able to stare at someone and look in their eyes. I mean, when do we get to do that in our lives? Not very often. Look in their eyes.
I know.
And I really, it blows me away. I just cry sometimes when I paint. This painting particularly, is of my dear friend Crystal Stokes. And our relationship, which I think I mentioned in here, restarted, when I was in a show at the Garage. Do you remember the Garage? That wonderful idea. And there were 60 painters or artists in there, and I was cruising around to see whose art was there and what I liked. And there was a little display of some beautiful drawings, particularly of a ballet dancer, I think I remember. And I looked around, the artist was not there, and so I looked for her. I felt this was a young artist with tremendous talent. And lo and behold, it was Crystal. I'm not sure how I found you, but I did.
I was looking for you too.
Yeah.
Aw.
And Crystal was with her mom, and it turned out that my midwifery practice was the practice that was of Crystal's life. And
Oh, wow.
I was not at birth. I was, not on call then, but so we have that connection, right? And we just really fell in love immediately with each other, and I welcomed her to, work with me to, continue her growth. She didn't actually come and work with me in my studio, but she did serve as a model a number of times for us. And this is one of the sessions. It was in my studio. And you have to look closely because the lighting in here doesn't allow you to see the blues that's in the background or in the back of her hair, but that is the snow, the color of snow reflecting back onto her hair as she sat there so incredibly gorgeously. There were probably a group of, I don't know.
Oh, we did it again, Mickey.
5 or more. Yeah.
Oh, I see the blue in her hair.
Yeah, it's there. It is there. And that's the snow. So that's really lovely.
Cool.
That's really lovely as well.
Oh.
So when Anne asked me if I had something I wanted to show here, I thought of Crystal, and I was talking to Ruth about it and about the story. She said, oh, I'm sorry, let me finish that. And Crystal went on to become her own well-known artist, and she would call me occasionally and ask me for advice. At one point, she was wondering whether she should go forward with a particular project for particular reasons. And I said, go forward, just do it and let people know how great you are. So she's had her own successful career. And Ruth said, well, let's invite Crystal. And so we get to be a twofer. And it also has helped to reunite us, which we were trying before that to be together, and we just never could quite seem to align our schedules. So here we are together.
Walls of the sea. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's what I would like to say. I'm thrilled that we are talking about this issue and bringing more art, more types of art, and more people into it. And we all need to see ourselves. Do I have time for one more story?
Yeah.
Okay. So I curated a show at the Helen Day a few years ago called, I can't remember the name of the show. What?
Women painting women?
No, it was Women Painting Women, but it was called Reclamation. So it was reclaiming our place and our right in this. And we invited women, the best women artists that I knew, representational, all of them, even though it's not mere representation, excuse me. And And we raised the money to pay for their shipping of their work from across the country, which is not usually the case for women artists, but is the case for men or artists, just saying. And we did that, and we had an extraordinary show there of women's art. And I was there one day, and I was just leading a group of some of our donors. And they were all older women, right? And we're looking at the art, and there's a story behind each artist, why they were chosen, all of those things. The work was extraordinary. And we were standing in front of a painting of something called Auntie. And it was a perfectly nude woman, about 85 years old, I would say, with pendulous breasts in her belly, and color was fantastic. And she was standing there with this amazing face, gorgeous picture. So we're there in front, and all of a sudden, a group of about a dozen kids came in. It was the art camp for one day at the time. And there are all these children all of a sudden come rushing in, and there's, all these paintings. And these two little girls, one little girl with long, dark ringlets, runs over to, there's this drawing on the side of the road, and it's giant, and it's a little girl with ringlets, wielding a sword behind her back, right? And this little girl, who was a mixed race girl, she goes like this, and she goes, "That's me." And her little friend, who was of Asian background, she spun around in the middle of the room, and she looked around, and there was a very famous Chinese immigrant painter from California, huge painting on it. And she said, "And that looks like me." And my donors looked up at Auntie, and they said, "She looks like us." And then George from the library, I don't know his last name, was there with a group of people from Montpelier. And he turned around and he pointed to another painting that was on the far wall. And it was two far women sitting there in jeans and their bodies and striped shirts on a bench in front of a barn. And he said, "And that looks like my family, and I've never seen my family in a museum, in a show before." And I went,
Yeah.
success, and the beauty of that. And women came from 4 hours away, 5 hours away in carloads to see that show because they didn't actually see themselves in our shows. So that's my story. So,
Thank you so much, August.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing the painting with us. It's lovely, and it's seen by so many people, and I really, really appreciate.
Well, I obviously could not have painted a beautiful painting like that without beauty.
Well, that is a perfect segue. I think we'll go to Crystal next, if you're able to come on up, and
I'll probably be a little bit shorter.
that's fine. That's totally fine. But yeah, come on up to the table with us and introduce yourself and tell us about your work.
My name is Crystal Stokes, and I'm a portrait artist. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for inviting me. And it's so nice to be able to display my work next to my dear friend and mentor, August Burns. I've admired her from the minute I've seen her work, and like she said, we were both, looking for each other when we were on display together at the garage. And so I've been a big fan, so it's really nice to be able to display. I've been painting since 2014, completely self-taught. I went through a huge transition in my life and kind of turned to art as a therapeutic process just to move through a lot of things. And started taking myself seriously in 2015 and decided to start showing. And from there, I did some modeling for August. And it wasn't until about the pandemic where I was approached by the Alchemist Brewery to do a collection and can art with them for a special brew called People Power. And so it's a mission to do that work. And that kind of ignited a big part of my art career.
Nice.
And from there, I was approached by what's now known as The Current, which used to be Helen Day. in Stowe. And the director, Rachel Moore, who's amazing, reached out and asked if I wanted to do a body of work to display in the library section. So I worked for about 6 months straight creating this. I had this whole idea. One of the pieces obviously is of my grandmother, but it was called Pieces of You. And I'm really into black and white photography. I love negative space. I love the idea of allowing the viewer to have leave a little bit more to the imagination. And as I noticed when we were all here earlier before we started the committee, someone had said, "Oh, it looks like somebody that I know." And so that's what I get all the time whenever I have, one of these pieces on display. And so the title of the show is Pieces of You. And so my whole interpretation is that we're all pieces of each other. And if we just take the time to recognize that, I think the world would be a better place. So my idea is, so all of the pieces I have are of my family members. So my idea was to continue on my family tree and eventually work my way out, but that's going to be a huge body. I kind of stopped at just like, a few family members. But it was a really great, opportunity, and I've met so many wonderful people in the community through that one series. I worked with Vermont Symphony Orchestra and created a huge piece for them that they displayed behind the orchestra during the middle of the pandemic. So that was fun.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, it was amazing. It definitely brought tears to my eyes to see it projected behind an orchestra. So it was the first time musicians had been together since the pandemic. They all wore masks, of course, but it was great to see and be a part of that. This past year, I displayed my work down at Art Basel Miami, so that was huge. Always wanted to kind of get outside of Vermont, where I'm not, considered like a brown artist, I'm just an artist. So that's a real thing in Vermont. I have reached out to August a couple of times to just talk with her about the emotions that come up with that. And then from there, I haven't really created in a year, so I'm kind of taking some time off. I'm in real estate. So that takes up most of my time. I also have a standalone property management business where I manage 30+ Airbnbs in Stowe, Vermont. So it's kind of where my focus is right now. But it's really nice to be able to still be a part of the art community, come out here, be with my friends, be with you all, and just talk about my work.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your work with us and allowing us to display it for this year. It's really special to have you and your grandmother, and have your mentor and you. The sort of like all those combinations are really, really just lovely. And we get a lot of compliments. People walk by and stop and look and come in and wonder what's going on. So with all of this work, people can love to come into our room, which makes us happy.
And now we could be better docents.
Yes,
Because we know more.
Yes, exactly.
And with the signage that Jessica
Yes,
put up
that's-
today, so you can read about that.
So my grandma's she's an author. She's an amazing, incredible woman. She just had her 86th birthday last week. So she's still with us. And
Nice.
she's a great dear friend of mine.
What is her name?
Catherine.
Stokes. Is she Stokes? as
Yeah,
well?
and so my mother's name is Catherine as well, just spelled differently.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Does she live here in Vermont?
she does.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. And if you're able to stay, you and August, I want to take photos of you with the artists and the pieces. So thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah.
We're going to turn to Victoria now. Victoria Vining.
Didn't know if I needed to bring anything or not, so I brought a few.
Oh, you brought props. That's awesome.
I did. So I actually looked up Crystal on Facebook and messaged her. I'm like, "Are you bringing anything?" Hopefully that wasn't weird.
Well, Victoria, so Senator Norris, you want to say a couple things to start, but I'm really happy to have you here. We actually, I inadvertently commissioned a piece for the room because Victoria made this piece especially for us. And so Senator Norris, do you want to say anything?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Victoria and Jeff, good friend. They live behind us. I met Jeff when both him and I were working up on the border. Border Patrol. My wife, more importantly, met Victoria. She used to be her mail lady. And somehow they got together, and we have several pieces of Victoria's artwork throughout our living room. I believe I've shown.
He's shown us that,
Sure.
very
Yeah.
proud of this art.
Sure, she'll continue to get more, but just proud to have her here along with her husband Jeff.
Yes,
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I am Victoria Whiting. This is the piece that I made for this, mostly because most of what I do is commission work. And so I didn't really have anything laying around the house. And I wanted to, something to represent Vermont. And so I sent this email out to my coworkers and friends and said, send me any photos that you think represent Vermont. And I wanted to make sure I represented a big range of ages and ethnicities. When I shared the photo, the first thing that a friend said to me, Jessica forwarded it all up in front of the county is, it is great and represents, except I would love to see some Abenaki representation in there. So I promised her as soon as I got it back, that's the first thing that I was gonna add to it. So I appreciated hearing from you guys as well. That there's a lot of my coworkers, grandparents and siblings, and 2 of my kids are in there as well.
Oh.
But I started doing portraits about 15 years ago. Just for friends, and it kind of just spread, and it's all custom stuff.
You're doing great.
I don't do great, sorry.
That's okay. Take a deep breath. It's fine.
Most artists don't talk.
No. And I'm very far from a full-time artist and a special educator.
Oh, cool.
I work in Sheldon. I'm doing my master's in pharmacy right now in Foundations of Education.
Right?
So, this one, we were talking about negative space. I have this picture of my daughter that I did that has lots of negative space in it.
Ooh.
So I'm taking oil painting classes right now, or I was when I was doing my art education. So that's one of the things that I did.
That's cool.
Right.
And I like the eyes. You're really good at the side eye. That's hard to capture.
That one someone sent to me, and I drew as a portrait for them over Christmas, and I just really liked his feeling, so I emailed her and asked if I could keep him in there, and she's but yeah, so a lot of custom portraits, mostly pencil. I'm starting to move into some painting. I've done a couple of children's books. Yeah. I really like bringing it.
Thank you. I mean, it was great emailing you back and forth about, what you were able to do. And I was completely impressed and surprised when you were like, I don't have anything, but I can create something.
Yeah.
And I was like, in a few weeks. So it was impressive.
I've never spent more than 10 hours on anything because I'm just really busy and we just have short attention span. I have 4 kids at home and doing my master's and working full time as a special
Wow.
educator. There's not much time.
And you did this over the holidays, so thank you so much.
I did that in 32 portrait orders.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I really appreciate you guys inviting me, and it's an honor.
Well, thank you for lending us your work for the year. And yeah, I mean, it's just really nice to have a collage of Vermont scenes and people on our wall.
Speaking of your time about eyes, this is one that I like that I like.
Oh, that's
Ooh, that's
My first ever colored pencil.
that's
right.
So I do have a little bit lighter. I'd rather represent Vermont.
yeah.
Well, thank you. Are there any questions?
When did you start? How did you start?
Actually, I drew a portrait for a friend in high school of her father who passed away, and she got so emotional about it that in that moment realized like I want to draw portraits for people.
But you took art in high school, is that?
There was like a regular art class, and then I went to Savannah College of Art and Design, but I did more of like the performance arts and dance. Met this guy, he was in the Marine Corps, he was about to get deployed, so I took a break for 10 years. Then I went to Academy of Art University in California to do my art education because I wanted to be an art teacher. Then the special ed position opened, so I quickly shifted to SVHU, finished my undergrad in psychology, and then now I'm doing Vermont State for special ed and general studies or foundation education. So that's complicated.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being a special educator.
Yes, seriously.
We so need them, so thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Seth.
I'm not much of an artist guy, whatever else, probably all can tell, but when my wife first started bringing pictures to Victoria, what I didn't realize was her ability to catch the eyes, as long as you're talking about that, but you probably can't see it, other folks, but when she started painting pictures of my family,
Yeah.
it was her ability to catch their personalities without even saying, wow, that's just amazing, just to catch that, your picture. That was great work.
Another one. Well, I had this one out the other day and someone, my son Wyatt, someone said, he looks mischievous.
Yes,
You know, like the fact that you can tell that from the picture, like he totally is.
Yeah.
I think he looks sweet in this picture, but the fact that she looked at it was like, he looks like he's the one that gets into trouble. I guess I could catch his
He also,
personality.
he also looks like his dad.
Yeah,
Hey.
Like, oh, yeah, I gotta do that, so He's the youngest of the four, so yeah, he gets away. So yeah, that's
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Victoria. It's really nice. Thanks for making the trip down to.
I
Yeah.
got to get off work a little early today.
And last but not least, the last piece of artwork on our walls is actually a piece of art from Senator White's
Yeah.
family. So I just want to turn it over to you to talk about it.
So I'll just start by saying the artist, the photographer, is no longer alive. The person who took this photograph is my great uncle, Collimer Abbott, who I know as Uncle Bud. He has a lot of things about his life that are spectacular. But the thing that has, I mean, he's got an incredible life if you ever want to talk to me about him as a person. But the reason that I really wanted to see this in the State House was because it represents my community. So I'm from White River Junction, and this photograph is of downtown White River Junction. And if you're familiar with kind of the story of White River Junction, you probably know that we had a decline for a pretty significant period of time. As a community, it felt like poverty and crime and like just the grittiness of that experience was very palpable and felt in our downtown. It felt very hollow. So I had experienced that while I was growing up as kind of my only concept of White River Junction. But I had the stories of my family and my great uncle and photography of what White River Junction had looked like as a part of, yeah, so I got to see that. So now White River Junction has really, we've had a renaissance and things have just changed. And art is a big part of that, actually, if you know the cartoon studies school and lots of other things. But that's why I really wanted this photograph, because it's the story of Vermont. And I think it's not just White River Junction, it's all sorts of downtowns. Yeah, so that's really why I wanted to photograph here. I should note that this is on loan from my literal living room. So I have to thank my husband for allowing us to have a kind of empty-ish space on our wall. And I love that I get to sit here and look at it every day because it's very grounding. So he also took lots of photos of Vermont in the 1950s, and it's incredible to see just like a nostalgic view of Vermont. Because what I noticed in his photography and what I compared to kind of the story you're telling today, is that Vermont is a very diverse place. And when people see art that they are reflected in, they feel like they are a part of that bigger story. And what I really appreciate about his photography is while there's a lot of landscapes and kind of the quintessential Vermont, you'll see a lot of like maple trees and farms and everything. He also has photos of real people and the experiences of real people. So if you ever want to see 1950s Vermont, it is very cool. And yeah, my great uncle Collimer Abbott did that. So yeah, so it's great.
Thank you.
If I could riff off that for just a minute, to pay attention to the shows that are up in the cafeteria. So that's a rotating gallery space, the only one we currently have. But the interpretive plan hopes to expand opportunities in other parts of the building. Susie Walrob's watercolors on clayboard are currently up there. But beginning in March, I wanted to mention at the request of Montpelier Alive and the Berry Partnership, we decided to do a show of two photographers, one of whom is August's husband, Elliot, who was here earlier.
Yes, I saw
And
Elliot.
Elliot went with August into the downtown in the immediate aftermath of the flood in July. They were among the many volunteers that responded to the catastrophe in both communities. At the suggestion of Montpelier Alive's Katie Trouts, we reached out to Berry and Shannon Alexander, and she did much the same thing in Berry. Both of these photographers took these amazing images, black and white, that will be on display in a show called Recovery. So Recovery will open, you'll see it when you get back from your March break. So that's when it will, and it'll be up there for the whole month of March.
It's great. That's great timing for the big bill that we're working on here, government response to natural disasters. So, yeah.
Exactly.
We went and toured Berry, last week, 2 weeks ago, I can't remember, 2 weeks ago. And as part of our work for flood recovery.
So this is the art response
Awesome.
to catastrophe.
The arts connected.
And on March 14th, we're gonna have a big reception up there
Great.
for the artists, but also to try to bring the volunteers from Montpelier and Berry to the State House,
Oh,
because I believe you're honoring them with a joint resolution. So
great.
it'll
Did you want to
burn.
add something?
I just wanted to add that, the importance of art and community and how art brings vitality to communities. And I think there's a lot of communities in the United States that have learned this and have created tremendous art spaces in their downtowns that people go to looking for that. I have a show of 20 or so pieces at the North Branch Cafe right now. I get personal emails and texts from people who I don't know, who are sitting there saying, appreciating the fact that they can go in, cup of tea, and just enjoy art. I call it slow art, but it brings a lot of traffic into that cafe, is having those art shows. So, it really is it is a win-win, even though artists don't make any money, but.
Yeah.
I know the pieces sell, and then you make money.
I also just want to note, Senator Chakosky, done a art show in the cafeteria. Do you want to mention that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, sorry, emotional in here, so. I am of Ukrainian descent. My father's Ukrainian, and watching over the last 2 years has been heartbreaking to watch my family's culture and history be obliterated. But what we often forget in war, we focus rightfully on the atrocity, but we forget that there's so much beauty. And so I worked with David and the Ukrainian diaspora in Vermont to bring Ukrainian art to the State House for the month of January, to remind people that, well, yes, there's destruction and devastation. That is a culture of rich beauty. And it was all really connecting. It meant a lot to me. I'm sorry. To get to focus on that. And it felt much like Senator White said, it felt for a moment every day at lunch, like I was at home, surrounded by my family who is in Ukraine and my family who is watching everything happen there. So it was healing. You wouldn't know that right now. As we approach this tomorrow, the 2-year anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine, I'm feeling it a lot today, but it was really, really helpful and wonderful to get to bring the history. And then there was textiles and there was modern photographs and older paintings. So it was a really mixed media show where we got to see history and contemporary. And I got to spend a little bit of time connected with my culture in a way that isn't the way that I right now have to talk about it every day. Because most of the time when someone finds out I'm Ukrainian, they're not asking me about the beautiful art.
Oh, and about those eggs.
Yes. Yeah, we did have cassava, but only out for the reception because they are highly fragile. So, thank you, yes, it is important.
It's important on so many levels.
Oh, that's.
Wow, well, this has been really great. Thank you all for joining us here in the room that's kind of a little warm and bright. Thank you, Susan and you, Crystal, for being like in the sunlight there. And thanks, Olivia, for constantly doing the shades to try to get them in the right position. This has been really great, everybody. Thank you for joining us and
We wanted some photos.
yeah, so if you can stay for some photos, we'll go